Hi, thank you so much for coming. It's really, really lovely to see so many happy, smiling faces despite the weather. I'm Natalie Pirks. I'm a sports correspondent for BBC News. My job essentially is to watch live sport and talk about it on the telly, which is a pretty good job. I won't tell you about the bad bits of our jobs as well, but it's a great job. But I also have a really lovely job today, and that is to chat to these guys and introduce you to them. We've got John Holmes, Rishi, Jain, Ruth Shaw, newly crowned OBE, right? Congratulations, Ruth. Zoiey Smale and Nate Williams. Honestly, these guys are brilliant. They've got some amazing anecdotes. They've got some huge experience in their field. I'm not going to bother to tell you about them because they can do a much better job than I can. So I'm going to ask them all now just to tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll have a chat about what the industry needs to be doing to do more on the topic of diversity and inclusion. So I'll hand over to you first, John.
Oh, thank you very much, Natalie. It's great to be with all of you. So I'm a freelance journalist and editor. Spent most of my career working at Sky Sports. I still work there part-time now as well. I've moved into kind of consultancy too. I do a lot of work with the Football v Homophobia campaign that hopefully a lot of you have heard of. And I write for a US-based website called Outsports, which is the kind of world leader around LGBTQ storytelling in sport. I also have worked in the past with Kick It Out and various other organisations. So I'm just really passionate about storytelling through sports media that helps to share stories from underrepresented groups and communities, amplify their voices. A lot of the storytelling I was able to do on the Sky platforms has been around the Rainbow Laces campaign, which Sky has been a big supporter of for about 8 years now. So that's kind of my background. Yeah, thank you.
My introduction is not as good as that.
That's a lie.
It's Rishi, Jain, job title is Director of Impact at Liverpool Football Club. My responsibilities are our overarching approach to sustainability. So for us, it's very much a focus on people, which is diversity, inclusion, and the planet, which is everything to do around the environment. I've worked in football for about 20 years or so now. Worked at Liverpool, worked at Man United, Kick It Out, sat on FA boards, etc. But essentially my entire career has revolved around using the power of sport to make a difference and make the world a better place.
On another day, we'll talk about how you cross over from United to Liverpool.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it now, it's not a problem.
Ruth.
Hello, I'm Ruth. I'm the Chief Executive of the Premier League Charitable Fund. And as well as having one of the best jobs in football, it's probably one of the best kept secrets in football because we are one of the largest sports charities in the world, and we fund all the charitable arms of professional football clubs. So all 92, we fund to deliver programmes in primary schools, secondary schools and community settings. And that's a workforce of around 6,500 people that we're directly funding, supporting through training, grants and programmes. And one of the reasons I'm here today is because with that network, we've got this incredible power to create inclusive cultures and communities and really make sure that people feel football is for everyone. So I'm really passionate about that, and I really feel like it's everyone's day job. So if you're working in football, you should be trying to improve the culture, think about people's lived experience. And so this isn't just for strategic EDI leads, this isn't just for people who've got it in the job title. And as an organisation, all 24 of us really care about every decision we're making sure it's conscious and inclusive to try and make that change that Rishi's talking about as well.
Thank you. Hello everybody, hopefully you can hear me. My voice is a little bit raspy, so apologies. My name is Zoiey Smale, pronoun she, her. I'm an inclusion and creative consultant. I've been involved in ED&I for longer than I'm willing to admit, I think, and long before it was given a fancy title as well, because for me, I was like, why would we not want more people participating in sport? Why would we not want more people investing in their passion for what sport and football can bring? And I have the wonderful job of working with global organisations, sports partnerships, right the way through to sports organisations, looking at actually how can we be really creative with trying to change the narrative. And I'll talk a little bit more around kind of some of the practical work that I get to see around how diversity, inclusion, equality have kind of been banded together. Alongside that, I also, because again, working in sport, we wear multiple hats, right? So my day job is obviously working in consultancy, but my evening job, I'm a coach, I'm official as well, and I also work in sports media as well.
Hi everybody, I'm Nate Williams. Been in the industry for 14 years now, very varied career, not very stable, I would say. I've been here for the last couple of days and I'm hearing about how everyone started, and they said like making teas, and I was like, I'm good at making tea, but I'm not very good at carrying it. So my sort of entry to the industry was answering phones on like 5 Live, and I spent 4 years at BBC Sport, worked alongside Nat, and you know, I hit a moment in my career where I was just, you know, didn't feel very championed there, so I went out and turned freelance in 2017, and I've done pretty much a lot of the events that I'd imagined doing, done world title fights in Vegas, press boxes in all 4 leagues, Rugby World Cups, just and a lot of different variants, and every step of the way there's always been a problem. And about 2 years ago, so my latest role was I made the jump to TV, and I worked with Channel 4 on their production for Tokyo 2020 and Beijing 2022. Obviously, when you're working on a Paralympic production, there's an emphasis on recruiting disabled talent and being part of that production. They're very good at recruiting disabled talent, but when it comes to talking about the adjustments needed for people to do the job, that sort of falls on deaf ears. And you know, I felt a lot of personal responsibility on that production, and that was sort of the basis of what I'm here as now, which is the founder of the Ability Group in Sport. Because from my outset and my personal experience within the industry, I wanted to make diversity more rounded and disability join the conversation. So like there's been BComs, that Women in Football, fantastic, LGBT sports media with John. We linked up and I said, I'm going to create the group for disabled people, and it's called the Ability Group in Sport. We represent all disabilities, whether it's physical, visual, neurodivergent, so anybody with under those categories is welcome to join. It's free. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn. But I think the outset for tags and for myself is just to make the industry realise that there are more disabled people with more challenges coming now. For me, it was pretty much challenging, but I can walk as well, so I can climb up steps in press boxes. The people that are coming to me with you know, visual impairments and you know, people in electric wheelchairs, they don't have that luxury that I have, where I can just get on with my disability and use it. So I'm just sort of trying to use tags and use events like this to teach people that more disabled people are coming. There is support that there wasn't before, and that's the message I'm here to send today.
Thank you so much. See, I told you they were brilliant. You're going to enjoy this. I will take questions from all of you at the end, but if any of you got any burning questions when you hear them say something specific, just whack your hand up and I'll come to you. So let's start with you, John. Just tell us a bit about why you founded the organisation, and also could you talk a little bit about some of the statistics we're seeing this season as well?
Yeah, thanks. So I left out sports media LGBT from my spiel earlier, knowing that the question was coming. So we are a network group and also an advocacy organisation. We started up in 2017, and a lot of it was really born out of my own really bad experiences of working in sports media, in football media particularly, during my 20s. Growing up in an industry that was ridiculously male-dominated, you know, it would not be uncommon for me to overhear sort of comments in the workplace that were discriminatory, sexist, misogynistic, sometimes racist, definitely homophobic. And I got to a kind of position around about sort of 2013 when my mental health was really, really poor. I felt like I wanted to jack it in. I didn't really know what else to do. Fortunately, things changed in that year in my own personal life. I was kind of met someone, was able to kind of come out, you know, professionally and personally. And that was a huge kind of sea change in my life, and helped me to understand that, you know, authenticity was kind of the secret to having a good work-life experience, you know, everything to do with that. So around about, 2016, 2017, began to kind of realize that there were people like me also in sports media. We weren't particularly visible, but, you know, through social media, which back then was a much more healthy, nice place to be, you know, you could make those connections online and kind of work out that there were people who'd gone through similar experiences. So we kind of decided to form a network group that would help to bring people together and work with a lot of those organisations that were also on their own journeys. So again, I was very fortunate to be working at Sky Sports at a time when the Rainbow Laces campaign was really beginning to take off. And Sky wanted to do a lot more in that space, like they had done for women, like they had done for people who are black or from diverse ethnic communities as well. So all that kind of change happened, and I was really, really fortunate to be there. So now the network's grown to about 75 kind of core members, but we have really busy social media channels as well that kind of share news and just bring those kind of underrepresented voices to life and share in a lot of the kind of experiences that they've had. And that has kind of snowballed into the work I do for Football v Homophobia, which has been going for about 15 years now. So I look after media and comms for that. We have a big annual awards event that we just had at the National Football Museum. And as Nat points out, this is at a time when sadly discrimination in football really seems to be on the rise. I'm sure a lot of people in this room will have had negative experiences of that on social media in particular. But we're also seeing heightened reports from being sent in to Kick It Out and other organisations, like highlighting homophobia at grassroots football, a huge rise in transphobia, which won't surprise you, sadly, with the kind of culture war climate that we're all living in at the moment. So it's about understanding those communities, the challenges that they face, and helping them to kind of find their place in the game and celebrate that.
Thank you. Rishi, just give us a bit of a background into what Liverpool's doing specifically to encourage diversity, encourage inclusion, both in its projects in the community and in the workforce.
Absolutely. So for us, it's probably best to describe that in sort of multiple facets. Obviously, Liverpool Football Club, biggest football club in the world. I've said it. It's official. We genuinely feel that we've got a responsibility to talk to these topics, both to our people, but also on our global channels. So that's a really big part of what we do through Red Together. So that's where we'll talk about the key dates that we all talk to: International Women's Day, Black History Month, International Disability, etc., LGBT History Month. But for us, it's how we do that storytelling piece to say the diversity of what makes Liverpool Football Club so great on the pitch, off the pitch. That's what makes Liverpool Football Club. So actually, when we've campaigned and when we talk about these activities, that's one of the first and foremost things that we always think about, is how do we tell the story externally to say this is what it means to be part of the Liverpool Football Club family, whether you're an employee, whether you're a supporter, whether you're a visitor, you just come for one day. I suppose, to be really honest, the challenge that we have and continue to have, as I'm sure most organisations do, is how you then continue to link that into your day-to-day working practices. Strategies in place, targets are in place, and what we've been able to do is using those sort of key strategic priorities for us, which we've always campaigned for and will campaign to. We will always think about, okay, if someone asks us, what's the so what of this campaign? You do this campaign, gets loads of likes, brilliant, engagement numbers are brilliant, but what is the so what? Why are you doing it? And that's actually why the strategy is really important. So what we've done is taken a really holistic, data-driven approach to the way that we're doing things now. And it's taken us a couple of years to get there, to be really honest, as it does with any organisation, but now reporting on that data quarterly, both for our current workforce, hopefully our candidates who are coming through roles, and actually it's actually given our hiring managers and our senior leaders the tools to make database decisions. Because if you think about it in football, those database decisions are made all the time when it comes to revenue, because that's football, that's the industry that we live within. But actually, from an industry generally, we probably don't think about it enough in terms of people. So when we are looking at hires, or we're looking at maybe a reconfiguration of a team, we're presenting hiring managers and senior leaders with, okay, this is how it affects your gender pay gap. Next step is, how does it affect your ethnicity pay gap? This is how it affects your balances when it's performance review time, when it's bonus time. This is your split, this is what it looks like. These are the things that you need to consider when you're making these decisions. So we are getting there. It's a slow burner, but actually a really important one for us to just continue to have these conversations all year round. What we're finding, just off the back of having those, is that there are pockets of the club where typically you might not expect them to be really good or really up for it, but they absolutely are, which is great, and you want to be pleasantly surprised. So actually now we're having little mini focus.
Give us examples.
I'm absolutely not giving examples. But there are pockets of people where you go, I didn't know you were up for this. And that's great, you want them. So they're challenging us, pushing us forward, being like, can we work with this recruitment agency? Can we work with these people? Can we do this? Can we do this? And sometimes I'm like, let's rein it in, guys, because we've got these targets. But actually, don't lose that appetite. So for us, it's working well. Will I ever sit or stand on a stage or do anything external where I'll say, you've cracked quality? Absolutely not. For us, key focus areas are LGBT+, disability, gender equality, and ethnic diversity. They will continue to be our 4 priorities for the foreseeable. That's not because the other protected characteristics aren't important. It just means that for me, you just can't have too many priorities. It becomes a to-do list, but we are getting there.
Brilliant. Ruth, you said earlier, best job in football. Just explain to us why you feel that, because it does seem from an outsider looking in that your job must be so rewarding.
Yeah. It's really, really purpose-driven, and I think everyone in the team, but also the network that we fund, they know what they're going to work for, and they're going to work to change people's lives, and most of it, or a lot of what we fund, is around children and young people. And we, as a charity, have been existing since 2010, and we've been funding those programmes for a long time too. So young people who might not have any other constant or stability in their life know that if they go to a kick session, that coach who has seen them grow up, who's worked with them, is going to be there week in, week out, giving them that stability, trusted adult in their life, safety to speak up about what's going on for them, including in school settings as well as communities. And so they're not just coaches, they're youth workers, and they're mental health workers, and they're educationalists, and they're people who really care about what they're doing. So I think, speak to people, and they talk about not just walking to work, but floating into work. They love what they do. It's hard, but they feel really rewarded by it. And so our job at the centre is to support them to do that, make sure the safeguarding and the training and the financial support is there so they can keep doing that job day in, day out. But yeah, I mean, the inclusion is part of that, because for young people, it's also the sense of belonging that they get from the football club, the badge and the brand, the identity, something they can feel part of, whatever else is going on for them. And actually a lot of our workforce as well, the network that we fund, would have come through as participants. So they might have been in a kick session as that 13-year-old who was having a difficult time but found somebody to speak to. And then they'll become a volunteer, and then they'll become one of the workforce. So 1 in 5 of our kicks coordinators were a participant once upon a time. And so they're seeing pathways and opportunities and employment and purpose, and they're giving back to the communities that they come from. So they've got lived experience that they're sharing. And I guess just another thought about what we're trying to do to develop that even further, we are thinking about the protected characteristics, but we're trying to take an intersectional approach as well. So young people have a lot going on in their life. They're not just their gender or their ethnicity or their sexuality. They're lots of other things as well. But trying to take that intersectional approach is something that we're trying to do as well.
I'll come back to you in a bit about who's doing some really stellar work. But Zoe, you've made the sort of switch from athlete and coach to working in this field. That's quite the switcheroo. Just tell us how you've used your experience as an athlete and how it sort of has moved into your new role.
Yeah, thank you. So I, like many of us, have a kind of love-hate relationship with sport. I fell in love with it when it didn't love me back, and I kind of still feel like it doesn't quite love me as much as I want it to right now. But I'm committed, I'm committed. If I'm into something, I'm into something. And I think, again, looking at the journey of what I've had in sport, I was very much, my career path was already designed for me. So again, long story short, my family come from a long line of medics working in the medical profession. So everything that I had to do as a child was to become a doctor. There was no question about that. There was no, but I might want to go on and be a lawyer, or I might want to go and be something else. There was none of that. It was, you are going to be this. That kind of was how it was. But I actually had a really unconventional way into sport. So I was actually told by my teacher at the time, I was in year 1, year 2, that I needed to fail at something. So sport would be a really good option. And my parents were told this. So my mum was like, yeah, you know what, let's go. Like, fail at something. And I think actually when we redefine what failure is, and actually when we redefine and empower that term, I have had a really good trajectory on flipping the narrative to say, you know what, I'm going to fail at something, but I'm going to fail at it well, and I'm going to use that opportunity to springboard into stuff. And I say this to my clients all the time. When we try something new, when we are looking to do something and we fail, that's a really good opportunity because we've been committed to something. So just to kind of build us as a bit of a foundation from that. Obviously, I'm a little bit confident as well. I have a really big ego. So I was like, I'm going to really commit to sport. And from there, I was able to go off and represent my country as an athlete when I was a lot younger, so when I was about 13 years old. And again, back then, there wasn't really a career from that. I knew that I was going to hit my peak. And I was looking at, actually, what can I do? What can I do next? I love sport. I love what it brings to my life. It's a whole different narrative of it's hard, right? It's not easy. And I learned a lot of resilience through that. And I think from that, when I transitioned into becoming a coach, really young, without kind of showing my age here, I was 13 when I qualified for that. This was long before the days of UKCC. On my 13th birthday, I was one of the youngest coaches to actually qualify. And from there, I worked again, grassroots to high performance. It was my secondary job. It was my love. It was my passion while studying to become a doctor. And I think from there, for me, I had nobody that I could look up to say, you know what, this is achievable, or this is the right path for you. I kind of had to do a lot of failing to be able to kind of come into this. And the reason why I'm kind of bringing this up from a big sort of holistic viewpoint is because it can be really easy to pick off those low-hanging fruits and go, you know what, we've got an initiative. That's great. And to link into both of your points, Rishi and Ruth, around looking at what the impact is, like you can, you know, say, yeah, we've got X, Y, Z, you know, initiative here. We've got all of this initiative here. But actually, when we look at what inclusion is, it's treating people as people. It's being really person-centered. And I think we've all got very different directions that we want to go in sport and in football. But I think that the opportunity for where we want to go is really kind of polarised. Like, for instance, I've worked in men's sport for my whole time, but unless I verbally say that, there is an assumption that I would coach women's sport, right? And it's like those little assumptions are kind of being built around. So when I'm speaking to my clients around what can we begin to do, it's looking at, actually, we've got Gen Z coming up as the next generation of leaders. How are we going to make sure that the initiatives that we're doing is actually going to serve the purpose of society? Because if we've got, you know, small individual pockets of leadership programs that actually is kind of telling, you know, the next generation of leaders to think and behave a certain way, when society is diversifying and actually we're trying to make them fit into broken systems, it kind of feels really counterintuitive. But again, I can talk about this all day. I get paid to do this all day. So if anyone's got any questions, but yeah, just to kind of look at the transition period for me, I have got so many different lenses of a pathway system through becoming an athlete, through kind of working grassroots to high performance, through working as a coach, through working as an official, through working for national governing bodies and active partnerships, through now taking a real big step back but looking at the global sports market and working with clients like Mercedes Formula One, right the way through some of your smaller organisations like British Wakeboarding, working with some football clubs as well. We've got Brentford in the house as well. Woo, Brentford. And Arsenal as well. So when we kind of like look at that and we're looking at how can we really begin to diversify, let's start with, what does diversity mean? What does inclusion feel like? Because it can be really easy to go, we're inclusive, but actually, are you just being inclusive or are you friendly? Because again, that's different. The use of equality versus equity. Again, if you give everyone the same stuff when they're from different starting lines, you're not going to get an equal output. So where's the equity? And when we begin to talk about equity, that again is where we then kind of have people who say, well, what about this area? Or what about this area? Or we're going to focus on this specific area. But okay, as somebody who has you know, non-visible disability, who is a black woman from a specific generation, again, I'm not going to reveal my age, but also kind of working in sport, the intersectionality is how can we treat people as people?
I also have, over my life, felt like sport didn't love me back, but then I never also competed for my country. So I feel like it might have failed me in different ways to it, how it failed you. Thank you. And I think, you know, what Zoe just said there, Nate, is really interesting. Yeah. You know, are you inclusive or are you just friendly? Yeah. And I know that, you know, earlier you said you didn't feel championed sometimes. No. So this is a very broad question, but how far have we come and how far is there still left to go?
It's like a marathon at the minute. You know, we're in about like mile 2 of the marathon where we're just, you know, starting, but there's still a long way to go. You know, I think one of the things, I think it's just trying to open people's minds and not, you know, put us in our little silos. So like, just because there's lots of great women's football reporters here, it doesn't mean they have to do just women's football. And that is the same for disabled people in the media. Paralympic year is seen as our year, like our sort of time. But I'm trying to teach the industry, like, you know, I'm trying to teach the industry that these people that I've got in my group, we've got 80 members now, which is fantastic considering we started with 10 2 years ago. And they're all F1 fans, they're football fans, but they're asking me, like, because I've been to Grand Slams, I've been to all these major events. It's like, how did you do it? And I was like, well, it doesn't matter how I did it, it's how probably you can do it. So it's about opening that conversation about, you know, just treating it as individualistic, because, You know, some wheelchair users, like myself, will require care. I don't need any care. So, like, for somebody to come up to me and say, oh, have you got your carer sorted? I was like, I don't need one. But, you know, it's just getting rid of those assumptions, really. And I think now that we've formed the Diversity Sports Alliance as well, with all the 4 groups, sort of intersectionality working together, I think it's a much more rounded conversation, because I think the reason why I reached out to John and Leon and Anna, hi Anna, you know, that's why we did it, because I feel like with the diversity calendar that we have, like March, June, October, like we're always trying to compete against each other. But I have a very strong opinion in that I want to see daily diversity, not just wait till March to celebrate women or June to celebrate, you know, daily diversity. That's the thing. And it kind of feels like with the disability, because we're always last in the conversation traditionally, because we're last in the calendar as well, because not many people here might know this, but our sort of awareness month goes between 2 months, and it's the last 2 months of the calendar, November and December, and everybody thinks December, Christmas, you know. So it's like, you know, we're always trying to compete for that spotlight, when really what me and John and everybody else in that group wants to see is just everybody like supporting each other on a daily basis. So if John comes to me saying, I've got this event, I want you to come, can't make the next one, but you know, we're sort of talking that way, and I think if the industry starts talking that way as well, and not sort of like treating it as a content calendar opportunity,
Yeah, facts.
then, you know, we'll be a lot more further up to the finish line of that marathon.
It's so true, and I'm sure so many women in here can relate to the whole International Women's Day thing and getting trotted out for that day. My 8-year-old daughter said to me, when's International Man's Day? And I said, it's every other day. She's learning. Actually, for all of you, I think it'd be really interesting to hear from all of you about how important it is that everyone from every walk of life and every single background sees themselves reflected back in football media, in football boards, in football clubs. Why is that important, and what more do we need to do you think? Who wants to take that one? Sorry.
I'll take that one. I think I was very much on the, like, my quote is, if you can't see it, be it. Like, I'm fed up of hearing people go, if you can't see it, like, you can't be it. No, if you can't see it, be it. Be that change maker, because you're here for a reason. Think about your passion points. Think about what impact you want to leave, that legacy that you want to leave. Like, this is not about being the best. This is about being better. And I think there'll be so many barriers that you might come across in various walks of life, whether that is just getting to a venue. You know, the amount of times that actually I would love to drive my nice car that I have purchased after a gym session and not be pulled over and questioned about, you know, kind of, where are you going, what are you doing, is this your car? And, you know, one time it's all right, but when it's like 4 or 5 times, you're like, right, there's a slight issue here. So there'll be barriers even trying to get to spaces. But I think if you are unapologetic in what you bring, and as kind of the work that I and a lot of us are doing is trying to change and redefine narratives, define your story. So if you can't see yourself somewhere represented, take that lead and go, you know what, I'm going to be that person. I'm going to put myself into this situation. I'm going to, you know, use my voice to empower the next generation, because somebody will be looking up for you. You might not see it, you might not be aware of it, but there'll be somebody that goes, you know what, I'm seeing that person there. I really resonate with that story. I really want to be a part of sport. And that's why we're all here, right? Because we're passionate about it. Like, because, you know, we could be doing other things, and sport doesn't necessarily pay that well in comparison to what we could be getting paid in the finance industry or, you know, in kind of law and things like that. But again, looking at things intersectionally. But if you can't see it, please, please, please be it.
And Nate, you were saying to me earlier that, you know, some people will sit and watch someone in a wheelchair, for example, and feel that that's not my disability, that doesn't relate to me. You're not staring back and seeing someone that reflects you.
Yep.
And is that something that people understand about disability? Do you think we've still got quite a long way to go with TV, you know, management and people that work in media in general?
100%, because it's like I say, you can get a room full of women, you can get a room full of, like, you know, race or ethnicity. With disability, it's slightly more complicated, because it's like, you know, everybody's so individualistic in the needs that they, you know, require to do the job. And I think you know, as long as it's an open conversation, then it's much better. Like early on in my career, it was very much a shut door, because the thing we're competing against, which is also the problem, but it's there for legal reasons, is health and safety. So when I was going to press boxes, I had stewards telling me wheelchairs can't be here, health and safety, you know. So I've always had that sort of battle, but it's there for a legal reason, and we're just trying to say, like, look, you don't have to be in like this one position, because like I was telling you earlier, one of the proudest projects that Tags produced last year was with one of our members, Joe Skinner at Burnley FC. You know, he's been working with the community arm for quite a long time. And first time Joe contacted me, he was like, I have to be a broadcaster, Nate. And I was like, okay, why broadcaster? And he just said, like, because I'm really physically impaired, I can't type very fast, I can't meet the deadlines that newspapers require. But as we were talking earlier, you know, broadcasters have similar deadlines. So, but these messages were coming through Facebook quite quick like that. And I was like, something doesn't add up here. So because I'm disabled, I can sort of like challenge other disabled people. I was like, you're saying you're not typing fast, but they're coming through like within split seconds. So I was like, how are you doing this, Joe? And it's just like, oh, I'm using speech dictation software. I was like, oh, light bulb moment, let's do a match report by speech to text. So we sold it to the Times, and we said, like, we really want to do this. It's a history-making project. And, you know, we're going to figure out the accessibility with the club. And, you know, Burnley were so open and they were so engaging with us. But the important thing, like, you know, Zoe said, is you've got to see it to be it. So it wasn't enough to send Joe down to Burnley and just do that report via speech to text with his byline on, because as we all know from a byline, you can't tell if they're disabled. So it's like you've got to film it as well and how it was done. So we did that whole project, but for that one match report in that week, that took 8 months of work, like 8 months of just planning accessibility, because like I say, I've got so many things to think about before I even come here today, where I'm going to park my car, toilets available, like diet planning, things like this that all disabled people have to think about. And it's about, you know, telling the industry that they have to think about this before sending somebody somewhere. And it's not just good enough to say, look, we've got a production team of disabled people. Like, you know, we've got to plan for their ability to do the job. So we did that planning process with Joe. Burnley worked with us. You know, there was a bit of a rights issue when the video went out, obviously, but, you know, we sorted it out with the club and the league, and it all got fine, and we published it, and that's been our first success. So we're teaching the industry to sort of, you know, think that way in terms of like how we open up the industry, how we accommodate for people, and just listen, understand, and act. Because the tiring thing for me as like a founder of this group is I get so many emails saying, yeah, that's a good idea, we'll do it. And then 2 weeks later, silence. Like what is actually happening? So I think the main point to the industry is just listen, understand the situation, act on it.
Mm-hmm. Actions, not words.
Yeah.
Ruth, I said I'd come back to you just to give us some examples of clubs that are getting it, are doing the whole action, not words thing.
I was actually thinking about an example to your question around whether representation matters, and I think it does matter to have relatable role models. I think that's really important. You should be able to see yourself reflected in senior positions in your organisation. But an example as well of where it really makes a practical difference to good practice. I was thinking about Preston North End Community Trust. And the example is if you don't have people with lived experience, then you may just be missing an opportunity to think about something you could do to make them feel included, make a underrepresented group feel included. And the colleague of ours there who leads on EDI working with us is a football fan, and he's Muslim, and he felt he was having to choose between his faith and his football club because prayer time often fell at the same time as match time, and there wasn't provision for him to pray. And he spoke to the club, and as a result, they've got prayer rooms in the building at Deepdale. They run a Ramadan Roadshow project where staff have education. They've attempted fasting if they're not used to fasting, to understand a bit more about what that experience would be like for Mo and other members of the Muslim community, because it's a very Muslim community right around the stadium. Last year they won an award for the work because they delivered 3,500 meals as part of Ramadan. They raised £8,000 for good causes. 350 Muslim football fans came and broke fast at an iftar at Deepdale. But that idea and that change in the education and culture that happened in the organisation became because somebody who was a football fan and didn't want to have to choose between football and faith was able to drive change from within the organisation. So I think it's an example of good practice, but it's also why you need the diversity of thought and experience and lived experience to make sure you're doing the best you can for everyone.
And is it about putting it in the sort of forefront of a culture of a club, for example? Because Rishi, you spoke earlier about sort of clubs' attachment to their communities, and Liverpool's a really good example of that. So for you, is your work around really driving home a culture that in 10 years' time, if you're not even there anymore and you might have moved on to a different club perhaps, back to United.
Retirement. That's what we're looking for.
But for you, would that be the absolute sort of crowning achievement, really, to put it at the forefront of the culture of the club?
Absolutely. I think very privileged to work for a football club which talks a lot about social values. And what I always say is that our fans probably expect more of us than they would with other clubs. And I think you can see that two ways. You can see that as an expectation, or you can see that as an opportunity. And I and the team and the colleagues are very much in the latter. It is an opportunity to go out there, be a bit bolder, be a bit braver, talk to topics which maybe people haven't talked to before. And if you land it right, and if you work with the key stakeholders, your supporters, your people that actually resonates with, it will always work. Don't get me wrong, there's always going to be an opportunity for people to criticise, and that's life, that's football, that's the industry that we operate within, but that's fine. But actually you can put that to one side if you know the reason why you've done something is for the people that actually it matters most to. So for us it works really well. I think our fans, as I said earlier, they expect a lot of us, but it's great. It's that opportunity to be able to say, we are Liverpool Football Club, this is what's important to us, we know this is what's important to you, we want to be doing more of that and continue to do more of that. Where it becomes a challenge is there has to be a balance of how much you can do, and that is tough. I think especially at a football club, I think, and I've got colleagues here from other football clubs who will be nodding along, I'm sure, that we can't do everything, but actually we can do a lot of things brilliantly, so we continue to try and do that.
John, you were talking earlier about statistics, and we're seeing hate rise, essentially. But how much of that is because we have become a lot better at calling it out, and therefore we are complaining about it, we are escalating it? Is there an element of that too? Is there something positive that could perhaps come out of those horrible statistics?
Definitely. I think people are much more aware now of the avenues available to them to report discrimination, and that's really, really healthy. But at the same time, you know, I think we have to sort of recognise, as I say, the climate we're in at the minute. There is certainly, you know, sections of whether that's politics or other parts of society are trying to use sport in some ways to divide us rather than to bring us together. You know, as an LGBTQ plus person working in football media, I see that quite often. And that's why, you know, I'm so passionate about, like, you know, being able to bring stories of inclusion to people's wider attention, because the media landscape is dominated by these stories of, you know, of conflict and of people who are fighting against, you know, ED&I as we see it. We're also seeing a lot of that in the US. It's beginning to come over here, and that's a really dangerous place to be. So I mean, I think about some of the people who I've been able to work with in women's football, you know, over recent years, and been able to help them sort of bring their stories to wider renown, such as a trans woman who's a goalkeeper at one of the many women and non-binary clubs that's kind of, you know, increasing in scope and breadth across the country. That's really encouraging. A trans man who plays in the women's game, who hasn't, you know, started his testosterone journey fully yet because the restrictions placed upon him means that he can't do that. But he's been searching for an inclusive club in which to play, and has had a lot of challenges, as you can imagine. We're seeing, you know, more people coming out as non-binary in professional women's football. We just had the first non-binary player in Australia in the A-League. That's really, really encouraging. And one of the players that we've done some work with at FEH and also Sky and BBC Sport, a Huddersfield player called Kath Simone, who's non-binary. They've just been selected for the Football Blacklist LGBTQ award because of their incredible influential work that they're doing on TikTok and platforms like that, educating people around against the gender binary and understanding more about, that kind of journey. So these kind of people, by us kind of, consuming the content that they're part of or that they're producing themselves, that's so important to help kind of frame our understanding and to make sure, as Zoe says, that people, can see themselves reflected at all levels of the game, whether that's playing or media or whatever that is. So, that's something that I'm always been really, really passionate about. And our network group, because of the platforms that we have access to, are able to bring those stories to more people.
And could all of you see that things are getting better? I don't want to sit here and say it's bad. I mean, I've been in the industry more than 2 decades, and for me, for women, I can see a lot more representation, a lot more people like me doing my job, which is fantastic. But what more do we need to do? Because, Nate, you were talking about not just saying, tell us what we need to do, including more people like you to make sure that they're doing the right thing.
It's the rhetoric I say to people is that when you see a disabled person, the first question that comes into people's heads that don't have a disability is like, how can they do that? And that's exactly the sorts of conversations that we had with broadcasters and other stakeholders. But I'm sort of like trying to change the mindset of not how can they do that, but how can we help them do that? So they put themselves first and into the firing line and say, right, we have to do something. It's not putting the responsibility on the disabled person anymore. Granted, there's some responsibility, like, for example, coming to this event, there's a responsibility on me to say to the event what I need and like how I do things. But it shouldn't be all on them. It has to be a bit of 50-50. And it's just about, changing that mindset of, being more open, encouraging the language and creating specific schemes for disabled people. Because the problem that we had, going back to the point that I made about being last in the conversation traditionally, is that when diversity schemes are set up, because our numbers are lower than the others, we're often missed off. So when I joined an initiative that sort of, engaging with the TV industry, because obviously you've been working with broadcast a long time, I can't get in a truck, but that's, some sort of things that we're trying to work around. So Channel 4, Amazon Prime and 11 other broadcasters joined this like round table and they put a pot of money in there and they're sort of like working around about, how we can make the TV production industry more accessible, because for a long time it is, if you can't climb steps, then you're screwed, basically. So, there are initiatives out there, but we're encouraging them to be more broader, more, direct, and then more disabled people will come. And that goes the same for all the 4 diversity or more.
Have any of you come up against any resistance to this? Obviously, Nate, you have. Zoe's now laughing at me like it was the stupidest question ever asked.
And can I answer the last question first?
Yeah, of course.
I think it's definitely got better. And I think when you find yourself in a room like this, you feel it's not a marathon, it's a relay, because there's loads of people you can pass the baton to, and it feels really positive.
Love
and
that.
It has got loads better. But then I think who's not in the room, and how do we change that? So the one thing I would like to see is something like this, but with everyone's chief exec alongside them, so that they're hearing it too, because it does come from the top, the leadership and the tone. It doesn't mean we can't all keep doing things every day, but I think that for me would be the thing that will keep us moving is the people who are not in the room being in the room, rather than just this is great and it keeps you going and you pass on the baton, but then when you get back to the marathon on your own, you probably need somebody else in the room.
It's a really good point.
Can I add one comment? Sorry. We spoke about it earlier, didn't we? Talk about trailblazers. We were catching up just before we asked them to eat, and I said that obviously it's great to be in a room full of trailblazers, that's what you want, and it's brilliant, but also the trailblazers get tired sometimes. So I think sometimes, yes, you can be the trailblazer, but you can also be the person next to someone supporting them. Like Nate's examples are absolutely incredible. And it's really inspired me hearing from him today, but actually it's making me think, okay, how sometimes if you're not fighting the fight for yourself, how can you fight it for someone else? Yeah. I think that's the thing that we don't collectively, football society, probably do enough of.
I also think personally that's a thing that happens to you as you get a little bit older as well. You start to get maybe perhaps a bit more comfortable in your own skin, and you can challenge things that you might not challenge at the start of your career. So there might be some of you that right at the start of their careers that feel that they can't quite speak to that yet. You might not feel confident enough at work or feel that you're in that position yet of enough, holding enough power. But I think, like Zoe said, almost go and be it have those conversations. They might be difficult, but if you understand that it's the best way forward, I think that's a really good thing to take away from today. Zoe, you were laughing at me when I asked that question. Go on, tell us.
I mean, where do I start? I thought this was going to be a bit of a therapy session, actually, if I start going, so maybe I won't do that. But I think there is a real parallel when it comes to ED&I around it being perceived as a bit of a HR problem to be fixed discrimination point of view versus that business opportunity and actually improving services. And I think we're getting really good, to link back to kind of the whole how far have we gone. We're really good now, I feel, at realising the benefit of actually by changing and modifying, we can actually make some money from this. We can actually employ new talent. We can work smarter, not harder. But on the other side, actually, when we look at the discrimination piece, the barriers and everything else on top of that, people don't want to talk about that stuff. And that is the sweet spot between the initiatives and the great stuff being fantastic and being sustainable. Because if we're not fixing the problem on the other side in that parallel, which is the biases that we had, like I, for one, was raised on Biff, Chip and Kipper books, which I don't know if any of you were. And honestly, the negative depictions that are in that book, I had to do so much unlearning in that because it really shaped my viewpoint of the world. And we are the product of our own environments. And if I say to you, I want you to think of 5 really close people that you would invite to your dinner party. Who are they? What do they speak like? What do they look like? How old are they? What's their demographic? And you were to kind of unpick that and look at actually, are they like me or are they somebody else? Or are they from different communities? Am I actually enriching myself by learning more, by having conversations with people, by proactively taking myself out of that comfort zone and go, you know what? The way that I have done something or the way that I have consumed something in the past might not necessarily be what it is today, right? Because society is evolving, and I think it's really easy to then be reinforced in stereotypes. And I think that kind of links back to what you were saying around, Nate, around kind of taking that 50-50 shift. So yes, I always come up across a lot of barriers when I start to have some of these conversations. Through my time actually in the sport, I found that I thought in my mind, the higher I climbed as a coach or an official, the more respect I'd get. However, that was the complete opposite because the higher up I climbed, the more people would be like, so what's your qualification? What do you do? What are your thoughts on this? How did you come to that solution? And the higher up you get, the more they try and tear you down. And I've always felt that I had to wear my CV on my sleeve, right, because of that. But that's completely different to actually how can we get more people to be better decision makers? How can we be better, slightly better than yesterday? And linking onto your point around CEOs, I would love to see children also equally come to some of these events, right? To see, actually, this is the great world of sport. Even the next generation of talent coming through that are at school or whatever, like coming in. So let's see leaders, let's see us, let's see the next generation coming through as well, because we're trying to leave the world in a better place than what we found it, right? I think we can all collectively say that. But I think, yes, from a barrier perspective, without it turning into a therapy session, there are lots of uncomfortable conversations that I have to have, and I know a lot of you in this room also have to have as well.
Anecdotally, I gave a speech to 400 primary school children on International Women's Day, and the amount of girls that put up their hand to ask me questions about how they wanted to play for Liverpool in the future and how could they be a WSL player, and asking me loads of questions about, one of them asked me if I've ever interviewed Cafu and Rivaldo, and I was like, they retired before you were even born, but I loved it. I think the kids are all right. I think they're going to be okay. Ruth, you were saying to me about when you sort of were working with WIF a decade ago, how you would get a lot of CEOs saying, we tried to get women, but none of them applied, or they weren't qualified enough, and you were like, here's a massive list I could have unrolled. How much has things changed? Are we getting there?
It is much, much better, and big global national conferences who couldn't find women for their panels 10 years ago, and still much better than they used to be, but you still see all white male panels at sporting conferences and events, and I cannot believe there are not plenty of talented people who bring different lived experience than white men do. And the debate is always, but nobody wants to be there as a token woman or a token anything. but that's suggesting that the people who are there, like that talent isn't diverse, and talent is totally diverse. You can find talent everywhere. It's the opportunity that is harder. And as I think I said to you, there are plenty of mediocre white men on panels every day.
Not on this panel.
Not on this panel, you know, and not at a WIF conference. It would never happen at a WIF conference, because they can do talent and diversity, and anyone can if they try a little bit harder. And create spaces that people want to come and speak to, because actually, if you don't create an environment where people feel that they will be heard or listened to, then why would they give their time, often free of charge, to go and make your business better? So I think, yeah, it's definitely much better than it was. But that was, 10 or 12 years ago. It did feel like a bit of a brick wall we're banging our heads against.
And John, do you think press boxes now are more welcoming? Do you think the industry, that it's quite insular and we all know each other and we've all, you know, do you think that's more representational now?
Well, I don't spend a lot of time in press boxes, because I've always had a very digital, desk job sort of focused kind of career, really. But from what I hear, press boxes are certainly becoming sort of much more friendlier, sort of inclusive places to work for. However, you know, as Nate will tell you, there have been challenges, that continue to be challenges across the football landscape in terms of access, and, you know, understanding things like neurodiversity and how that might affect people's reporting experience as well. But yeah, I do see positive changes in the industry. That's not to say, though, that the members of our network group don't experience, you know, quite a lot of abuse and hate, particularly online. You know, the social media platforms are getting increasingly toxic, and, you know, that's again one of the reasons why Football v Homophobia, by its very nature, is of course an anti-discrimination organisation, but we do a huge amount of community building work as well. And the media side that I tend to look after, you know, will really try to kind of work with that. I think of a story, somebody that we kind of worked a lot closely with over the past year or so around an event that we did called Football Pride, which was a big kind of community building event. She is a British Pakistani woman who created an LGBTQ inclusive football club in Manchester. Brilliant name, Lesbi United. And she just won an award with her league at our recent event in Manchester. It was fantastic to see the work that she's been doing. She's also trying to create a new kind of women's football collective platform called Marta. So look out for that on Instagram, which is, you know, going to be a space where women can, you know, have conversations about the game at all levels, outside of the kind of nudges and tweaks of Joey Barton and his ilk, you know, on social
Voldemort.
media. So yeah, if there are places where we don't feel welcome because people like that with a big influence and making it unhealthy, let's go and create our own spaces, you know, welcome people in and build up that way, so that even press boxes, you know, have a part to play in that, because we're all storytellers in our own right.
I'm going to ask you all, before we take some questions, I'm just going to ask you all to think of the one thing you would like our lovely audience to take away from what you guys have said today. We'll keep it short so we can have some questions. But I just wanted to also remind you all about the Get On Side pledge. Just check whether your organisation that you work for has got on board, has made a pledge. It's all about encouraging gender equality, essentially, in football and on the pitch and off the pitch. So just check whether the company you work for has made one of those pledges to get on side, because it's a really good thing to do. So, one thing that you'd like our audience to take away before I take questions, John?
Well, one of the things that's kind of irritated members of our group recently has been this kind of backlash against, you know, ED&I kind of storytelling in media. You might have seen this kind of a lot of dialogue around Football Focus on BBC Sport, which obviously has changed the nature, I think, of the tone and gaze of, I guess, of that programme, and is now really encouraging different types of grassroots football, you know, projecting that onto a bigger audience. So it's changed over time, but of course there's a certain group of people who are obviously quite domineering in the media space, who will push back against that, don't like to see things change, don't like to see women's voices being elevated onto platforms and people from other kind of underrepresented groups in the game. So I want editors, I want people, you know, in senior positions of leadership to push back against that, you know, that sense of compartmentalizing and of taking back spaces, you know, that people see to be traditionally theirs. All this tradition nonsense needs to be expelled, and we need to understand the here and now and make sure that people are generally reflected at all levels of football media.
Well said. Rishi?
I think the thought that's jumping out to me a lot is what does the next conference look like? So obviously it's called the Be Inspired Conference. What's the one thing or two things that we can all do? One for ourselves and two for someone else. And what could we come back and stand up and say, we've done something, we've made a difference with somebody else?
Love that. Ruth?
Mine are two thoughts that occurred to me as I was hearing others speak, and one is a Nelson Mandela quote, I never fail, I win or I learn. And I think if we have that attitude in what we're doing, whatever we do, we win or learn. And the other was that allyship is a verb, not a noun. And as we were talking and thinking about intersectionality and how we can all do more for each other, just to be really active and intentional.
I think for me, it's belonging is the subtle art between the me and the we. So find your people and protect your well-being. Like, this is tough. Like, it is tough. And we spoke about it being a relay. Find your people, because I know that there are so many people, including in this room right now, who have really helped me, because the work I do is heavy. There's a lot of baggage that I've got to carry around, and it's a good job I'm 6 foot tall and I've got big hands, right? But find your people and protect that well-being.
I think from me, on my sort of personal experience that I've touched on, is think about what you don't think about, if that makes sense. Because, you know, think about how you got here today and how other people will get here today. You know, that's how we improve the conversation. And I'm going to use an intersectional example because I've spoken to John about this. So in my last job, there was a situation where, you know, they were going to turn all disabled toilets into all gender toilets to accommodate for more people who have gender identity problems. So I didn't have enough knowledge to challenge that. So instead of me being personally angry that my access needs have been taken away from this renaming of toilets, I consulted with John and I say, like, look, how do I tackle this from, you know, someone in your community who would view it in a different way? So it's just about talking to people with that experience, and that's why the the DSA exists, so we can consult with each other from our own experiences and just make sure we get the conversation right. And I just wanted to say as well, because I've had a bit of a tags email where I've been telling people off for mouthing off on social media about not getting jobs and things like that. Don't take decisions personal, take them professional. Like, don't think it's me that's the problem. Think it's like the industry, the state of the industry, you know, what could I have done better? So I just think that those 2 points are very key to take away, in diversity and also reflection on yourselves.
Really good advice from all of you. I'm going to get shouted at for going over, but does anyone have any questions? Anyone? Yes. Is there a microphone?
I know everybody's going to get fed up with me because I'm always putting my hand up, but I have to be a voice. So I've come from Nottingham and I'm kind of representing the South Asian Muslim community. I think it's amazing, all of you over the panel, what you've done, how much you've achieved and where you're going. But I still feel that for the South Asian Muslim community, it's still non-existent. There's not enough representation on the high level as an industry. They have the responsibility. And it's nice to believe in it, but you also need the backing. You need the industry to be on your back, otherwise it could be a very long and dark road. And going down this long and dark road, you don't want women and the girls to miss out on opportunities that are accessible for other girls. So in that sense, I feel that the football industry has a lot of work that they need to do, and I know it's not going to get done overnight, but I feel that I'm asking the same question that I asked 15 years ago, and the answer is still the same. So I know we've done a lot of work in the community base, but sometimes I feel like it's not a tick box, but it's just community-based. It's not going anywhere up, and that's where the change need to be made from the community going up to the hierarchy and vice versa. When the decisions are being made and implemented, they need to be mindful of that ethnic community, and there needs to be present of that majority within the, so the minority in the majority in the room. So on a personal perspective, because my daughter plays football, I find that she has a lot more challenges because of where she comes from, who she is, and being a woman, a girl, sorry. But I think we all need to work together and help each other. Sometimes I feel we kind of work against to get to the high platform, and we don't realise sometimes we're stepping on people that need the most support to just get a helping hand to get to where everybody else want to get to. So
I think that speaks to your point and your point, Nate, doesn't it? That, you know, what's this conference going to look like next year? Are you going to be back asking the same questions because nothing's changed?
I don't want to be.
Yeah,
I've been asking it for 15 years.
Well, I really hope you're not. But, you know, I'd love to see you. But I hope you're not asking
and
this
I will
question
do.
again.
Yeah. I have really, really enjoyed it. It has been, like you say, it's been really inspiring. I've learned a lot. But at the same time, it has been an eye-opener to say, looking around and saying, look, there's a lack of representation and there needs to be more work, even though we've gone over so much in such a small scale. And I think one of the panel, they were saying we're going at such a fast speed to where we're getting to. I sometimes feel there's a people that are playing catch-up, don't want to make that gap even longer or harder for them to reach. So,
well, I'm going to get shouted at, but come and talk to us afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming out. And can we get a big round of applause, please, for our brilliant panel?